Hello, I'm Andrew Tsao. In this episode of Backstory, we're going to see a trailer for American Messiah, an unusual and unique film that predates the concept of the mockumentary. It's a film within a film that goes behind the scenes of a project meant to reinvent the career of its star, and it was developed here at UW by Professor Taso Lagos. Taso, welcome to Backstory. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Great to be here.
First, we would like to talk a little bit about your own journey that arrived you at American Messiah, and because I know you a little bit and read a little about your background, you had mentioned growing up with a certain kind of love for cinema and how it has stayed with you your whole life. So let's get a little background on what that relationship's all about.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I guess I should say you deserve the Nobel Peace Prize for watching the movie. The film and my love of film began when I was a boy in the small village in Greece. And I saw my first film when I was about 4.5 years old. And I sometimes describe it as a religious experience because I would go to the church, and if you've ever been to a Greek Orthodox church, they're all icons everywhere. The whole space, the ceilings, everything is all icons. So it's very visual. So when I saw my first film, and this is, 4.5 years old, it was the same thing. So I thought, oh, this is like a religious experience. So it's like what I saw in the church and what I see here in what was literally a bed sheet was like God revealed. I mean, that sounds kind of sacrilegious, but in a sense it was.
Is this in a local cinema in your hometown? With I'm getting this image of you at the coming in, and the big screen is lit up, and here come the images. And
no, it wasn't a big screen. It was literally a bed sheet, and it was on top of a cafe with a guy with an old hand crank projector showing this film, and it was a 1958 film called Pony Express with Charlton Heston. That was the first film. I found out the title later. I didn't even know about it. And of course in Greek subtitles, I couldn't read. I was 4.5 years old. And it was just absolutely, I mean, I remember sitting in the front, and there were the benches for the kids in the front and the chairs in the back for the adults. And so my brother and I sat in the front, and it was under the sky. It was just a beautiful summer evening. And the moment that the images flickered on the screen, it was like
everything changed.
I mean, literally, I was transported to some other weird place, and it was the Midwest with this tall corn, and cowboys and Native Americans.
So from there, it obviously becomes something you're passionate about. What is the journey to becoming the filmmaker then later?
Well, that's a very interesting and profound question. I mean, I fell in love with films at that moment, and I told my parents that's what I want to do the rest of my life, and of course they thought I was crazy. and the story I can tell you about that was that the guy who came into the village who brought the films, he went around. He was a traveling exhibitor.
Okay, so he had his projector.
He had his projector.
He would go from village to village, set up where he could, set up the bed sheet, and somehow he had acquired these American films, and there he was putting them on.
I thought he made the films. His name was Taso too, so I thought, I got to schmooze this guy, I got to get to know him. So I did. I became his assistant. I was sort of helping him set up the little clapperboard in the middle of the village square. And the one time he allowed me to go into his Chevy he had a little old Chevy with a megaphone on top, and he'd go around the whole village announcing that film. I was there. So I said to him, Taso, I've been helping you all these weeks. Can I make a film? He says, Taso, I don't make these films, I just show them. So my first disappointment. And then we came to the U.S. My family came to the U.S. and I started going to films and reading about them. And one day I thought, well, maybe I should start making them.
So as you come here and your relationship to the films grows and evolves, you were talking about Pony Express with Charlton Heston. What were some of the more impactful films from maybe your teen years and such that started to really bring you to think about the aesthetics of the films you would like to make, the ones that sort of influenced you in that way?
Well, I remember getting a hold of the screenplay to Chinatown and literally handwriting it by, the whole entire screenplay to understand the mechanics of screenplays.
Robert Towne's classic screenplay made by Roman Polanski with Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway. Iconic,
Fantastic. And the work of Stanley Kubrick, I remember seeing in 2001. So those films really kind of opened up the door for me in terms of what it means to be a filmmaker and try to tell a story visually. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. I mean,
So leading us up to American Messiah, this idea is not just I'm going to tell a story on film, but I'm going to tell a story within a story that begins to explore the lines between fact and fiction and fact. So
Right.
talk to me a little bit about setting yourself up for a challenge like that.
I began with the title. I was living in Los Angeles at that time, and the title came to me, American Messiah, and I thought that was a very interesting title. So I thought, well, what do I do with this? And so the idea was, from thinking about the title and what it could mean, I began to develop this story about this woman who ends up, she's an actress,
Yes.
she's an actor,
Yeah.
and she ends up, she's a pornographer as well,
Yeah.
and she ends up in this movie, and she literally takes on the role of the Messiah.
Yeah.
But the other thing, when I was thinking about the title, the other thing that occurred to me was, and maybe it goes back to the first religious influence in the village, was that, the idea of a movie set is very much like sort of a biblical thing, if that kind of makes sense, in terms of how big it is and how important it is, and the kind of things that happen, and
Yeah.
and these experiences of being on the movie set. So I thought, wait a second, what happens if we take sort of the last chapter of Jesus and put
Yeah.
that on a movie set? Kind
Okay.
of combine them together.
But you ended up with a very, I don't want to give a lot away about the film because I want our viewers to see it, but it sounds like we're talking about a highly dramatic situation, but we're going to see that you found a style that was not a straight drama. And I also want you to talk a little bit about the fact that the film works in terms of a film within a film, but also has a great deal of social satire and talk about celebrity and the notion of what it means to be a film icon, in the sense that you're taking a character that was popular in a genre, as you say, porn, and is reinventing yourself. Maybe that leads us into just a brief conversation about your own work as a professor, and your thoughts about how you ended up making essentially what's kind of a social satire in that way.
Well, thank you. I mean, the whole idea of the social satire, I've always loved films that have a satirical bent. Spinal Tap and,
Yeah.
and the work Princess Bride is
Okay.
one of my favorite films. So the idea was to take these characters, and especially movie characters, movie actors, and make a statement about them. And part of it is that, I mean, you're a drama professor. You know that in the 19th century, a lot of actors were considered to be like prostitutes. So
Yes.
now they're not. They're
Yeah.
big
Some
stars.
are not.
Some are not. We won't say who,
Yeah,
but
right.
so the idea was, so they become sort of these big mythical social figures, very popular. But at the same time, there's a kind of an interesting element within being a star.
Okay.
That sort of, to me, related to the idea of maybe there's a kind of religious element quality to this. So how, if I played with this,
celebrity worship, star
absolutely,
worship.
right?
Yeah, of
we
course.
literally worship stars.
Yeah.
So how can we work that into a story that
Yeah.
somehow combines those two elements together? And so that's the idea of a movie within a movie. So that's how it sort of came.
Okay.
And it was really by accident. I didn't have any sort of large message to say about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a certain message about what I think about Hollywood. I think
Yeah.
Hollywood does extraordinary things. But at the same time, the way that we kind of worship
Yep.
these actors, and sometimes not critically,
Yeah.
is the thing I was trying to sort of say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
yeah.
part of that whole, I get that question a lot from actors, because I teach actors, and I say, listen, there's a difference between an actor and a star. There's a difference between a star and an actor. There's a difference between a star and an actor and a celebrity. But the funny thing is, the lines blur constantly
Right.
and go back and forth, and it's part of what makes what we do fascinating, because once you start to render the image as an icon, getting back to that idea, reality changes.
Yeah, and it's an interesting idea, Andrew, that about this whole notion of what is reality, because and that was the other thing we were trying to do in the film. And by the way, a lot of the credit goes to my writing partner Adam Gold, who did the screenplay on this film. It was really magnificent. But the idea was, if we take this line about what is celebrity,
Yeah.
what is fame,
Yeah.
and why do we follow certain people, and then how does that relate to sort of the spiritual leaders, and
Yeah.
why do we follow them? What's the idea behind it, and can we think about it perhaps critically? So those are sort of the ideas that were kind of all, we all put them into a blender and
Great, thank you. Now here's a look at the trailer for American Messiah.
Hi, I'm Jesus Christ. You may know me better as the Messiah. I've been asked by Phillips Beverages to come and talk to you about the miraculous quality of Callista wines. I guess they think I'm a bit of an expert. Once in Cana, I turned water into wine, and this is exactly how it tasted. But don't take my word for it. Please, try some for yourself. It just might make a believer out of you.
So, Taso, the genre that we call mockumentary now is well known. Filmmakers like Sacha Baron Cohen and Christopher Guest, and you earlier mentioned Spinal Tap as an influence, which was really sort of the landmark in that genre. But today it's an accepted genre, and you and I were just joking before that it won't be long before the Academy Awards has a category for it. But when you were making American Messiah, the label wasn't really there yet. It was just a sort of way into telling your story. Talk a little bit about your relationship to that form. I mean, you know, what was it that led you to realize this is the way American Messiah works best? Is if I can step in and step out and go behind the scenes.
Well, first of all, Andrew, it was a low-budget film, so we didn't have any special effects. We couldn't do car chases or anything like that. So we had to have a story that I thought would be interesting to the viewer. And yeah, I had no idea about this mockumentary. I didn't even know what the word was. Yeah. But I was intrigued by the idea of what happened with Spinal Tap, that if you could take a story and make it interesting and make perhaps the viewer think a little bit, I mean, or think twice about what was going on, then we could make up the fact that we're just a low-budget film. We don't have any big stars, we don't have anything. So, and that was really the premise of it. But I also like the story because to me, we were trying to actually, we didn't have a message, but we were trying to say something in terms of the possibility of film. What can film really do? And so started having these different layers.
Okay. Now, so you're working closely with Mr. Gold, the screenwriter, as this develops. And so both of you are sort of grabbed onto this sensibility and sort of began to develop scenes around this idea together?
Right. Well, we did. I mean, the story that I had from before, and I had tried different versions of it, and I had worked with different people, but Adam, I thought, did a great job in terms of being able to translate the message, the idea that I had into a finished screenplay. Well, the notion was that if we have this story that has these different elements, these different layers, and we're trying to make it very interesting and compelling, then we can make up the shortfall for the fact that we don't have a big budget.
Right.
But also, if we can make it interesting and make people think, and especially when you talk about the idea of religion in this country, which I think has a lot of history, then perhaps what we can do is like people might watch this and say, wow, this is really kind of interesting. We know that we were not going to get, you know, excellent production values because we just didn't have those kinds of resources. At the same time, Andrew, we knew from the beginning that we were going to have to shoot this film only in 4 or 5 days.
That was another thing I wanted to bring up to our viewers. Literally 4 or 5 days. And at that time, I think you mentioned in the material I got, we're talking about $20,000.
$20,000. And the reason for that was, it was very simple. I wanted to get some top professionals to work on this project. We had no money to pay anybody. So the only way we could get people to do this film was to at least say, okay, just give us 4 days of your life. Over Thanksgiving weekend. That's all. You know, if you don't like the project, it's not like End of the World where you commit to 4 weeks of a regular film. So we had to do something where we only had a limited time. So the idea of doing the film within the film also worked within that concept, because we could shoot the regular film and then have the documentary crews
shooting the making of the film. And everything is layering one upon the next. So getting back to the content part, one of the things I love most about the film is you have an ethically challenged movie producer espousing on ethics. You have a former porn star who is trying to reinvent herself as a serious actress, talking about artistic integrity. This layer of satire is quite interesting in the film, and it kind of wraps the whole thing in a context. Is this a personal sort of satirical sensibility of yours? Because it's so whimsical and interesting, the voices you put in those characters.
Well, again, that goes back to what Adam Gold did, but the idea was with the characters was to make them very different. I've always loved films where you go against type.
Okay.
So you take characters who might be thinking or speaking a particular way, but they do something different. Because I think it makes it interesting. I don't like this sort of typecasting idea. But also because, you know, if you think about the religious metaphor of this film, is that you have this porn star where if you read the New Testament, you know, Jesus went and dealt with people who were not the most popular people in the community.
There's a lot of talk about who Mary Magdalene really was.
So the idea was, you know, why can't you have this woman who, okay, her lifestyle may be not something that's fashionable or acceptable, but she can still be a good person.
Yeah.
She can still evolve into something that is that is acceptable. So I like that idea of sort of human beings who might be a particular way, but they do something else.
Yeah.
Because I think it's also very interesting visually.
I was just suddenly, as you were talking, I suddenly was reminded of an approach to this subject from a very different point of view, which is Michael Tolkin's film The Rapture with Mimi Rogers. She is a former phone sex operator who is literally has a revelation per the book of Revelations in the Bible that predicts the end of humankind, but he treats it in a very, very serious way. The other film that made me think about genre busting and the filmmakers that were influenced from you is like filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick. You look at Dr. Strangelove. What do you call that film? Is it a political film? Is it a satire? Is it a comedy?
Right.
Ends with a nuclear bomb. You know what I mean? So it really defies genre. So you're continuing to make films now. I've seen some of your recent work, fantastic work you've done with students in your study abroad programs. I love the idea that you're using storytelling to teach culture and all of that. But this film was made at a time where you literally had to bring the Panavision cameras out and the whole crew and all of this. And today we're sitting here. This film could be made in a very, very different way. How has the change in the technology changed the way you think about the projects you do now?
Well, it would be a different film, Andrew. I mean, it would be great. I mean, now we can take a little camcorder, a little iPhone, you can make a movie. At that time, the idea was, well, we were shooting on film, so we didn't have a choice. And by the way, the reason why we ended up getting Panavision, and they gave us the camera for free. The only thing we had to pay for was the shipping. So they literally said, you can have this camera for free because they believed in I don't know, maybe I just talked them into whatever.
You clearly did.
Yeah, and so when we had our DP come onto the set and saw that the camera was there, he was absolutely shocked. I mean, he was like, So that made a difference. But I mean, now it would be just a very, very different project. It would be $20 at the most now. But the fact that we did shoot it on film, I think, speaks about that particular era. So it would be a different film now if you did it on video. Yeah.
And so for you now, as you write and create and think about the projects you're making, this new availability fundamentally changes the way you think about stories. For example, now you say you could grab a small camera and go to maybe locations you could have, like you had 4 days with that equipment.
Right.
Well, now you can change that whole paradigm. How has it changed the way you view stories you want to tell?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I've changed the way I view stories, but I think that there are more toolkits. There are more tools to our toolkits that we can use to make stories interesting. So for me, certain stories can be done on film, certain stories can be done on video. So the way that I would think of it now is that, well, if I only have, $100 or $1,000 or $100,000, what kind of story can I make? So it's really the budget that determines sort of the form. But I love the fact that we have all these tools now. I love the fact that we can just all go around and make these films for hardly anything. And the next project that I'm thinking about, Andrew, is even going to take the idea of the Hollywood and the sort of the plane even to another scale. I'm going to do something which I think might be a little bit radical, but it's going to be very weird, where we're breaking through the plane of illusion in a film.
Okay, take us one more step down that path.
Well, I don't know how to explain without giving it away. It's going to be where it's going to be a film within a film, but it's going to be like, wait a second, we are broken the distance
Yes.
between reality and the film.
Okay.
There's going to be something that happens in the film
Yeah.
that literally breaks through that frame,
the plane, yeah.
the plane, and comes to reality. So that's all I can say right now.
I
And
love it.
It's something I've been working on for many, many years, and it's something that I feel like I really have to do.
That's fantastic. We look forward to it. It's always great to have you here.
Thank you,
Thank you
Andrew.
so much for
Thank
being
you,
with
Andrew.
us, Taso.
Thank you very
Yeah, I
much.
can't wait to see that one. It's great.
It's gonna be
I love it.
crazy.
Breaking through the plane. And me here breaking through your television screen to say thank you for watching Backstory. I'm Andrew Tsao, and I will see you again behind the scenes. So I